Hello, I'm so happy I got a hold of you. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Lucious Showcase. I am Lucious T, and today we're taking a look at the PS1 RPG Squaresoft classic that takes place in Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice. And there's actually a lot of Final Fantasy Tactics DNA in this game, which I was surprised about, and that is Vagrant Story. Now, if you're like me and you are interested in these old PS1 RPGs, but, you know, you got the big, the ones everyone knows, the Final Fantasies. You've heard of the Xenogears. You've heard of the Breath of Fires. Well, a game you'll see talked about all the time is Vagrant Story. But what is Vagrant Story? No one really goes into it. I started the game thinking it was going to be another turn-based RPG, party-based. That's not what this is all. If anything, it's more akin to a Metal Gear Solid or a Soul Reaver, Legacy of Kain type game as far as the presentation goes, but it has a combat system unlike anything else I've ever played with, which is both incredible, but also incredibly annoying and frustrating to learn. So let's get into it. The game is very, very cinematic. This is a 2000 game. I think it came out in 2000. One of the last games before Squeenix came to be. So, RIP. It takes place in Ivalice, like I said. You can see a lot of the sound effect and assets sort of that were used in the Lucavi transformations that were super cool, used for just spells throughout this game. Story-wise, it is all over the damn place. I can't even tell you what's really going on until I get to the end of it. You play as a guy named Ashley Riot, who is a risk breaker, who is going into this insurgency going on at some mythical area where the darkness can come into this world. You got a guy named Sydney who is controlling it, and his guy Hardin, who they've kidnapped the king's son, and then you have Merlos, who's also somehow knows Ashley, a risk breaker. She gets kidnapped, and then there's some other faction that also can control things, and they're trying to get Sydney, and it's just friends become enemies, enemy becomes friends. You learn some stuff. You go back and you see Ashley either, you know, he had a family that was murdered, and that's kind of what's put him on this path. It's all over the place. It's actually, once you get through it, pretty good, but going through it, ignore parts of it and just get to the game because it is very highbrow. This game is the definition of a cult success. I can see why, because you'll read about it. Everyone says this game is underrated. It's underrated, but there are so many barriers to entry. I was talking to some friends the other night, and I was saying looking at this game is like looking into an alternate timeline of game design of what could have been, because this game plays kind of like Transistor, the Parasite Eve games. You have the ability, when you engage an attack, you can attack different limbs, kind of like Eternal Darkness, and you get a hit percentage on each limb. And then as you progress your attacks, you build up something called your risk meter. And the higher your risk meter goes up, the lower your percentage to hit goes, but also your higher attack values, but also the higher the enemy can attack you. And in honestly, this whole thing is kind of, I understand why they put it in there, because this is a chain attack game where when you initiate an attack, you'll see an exclamation point come over your head, and then if you time it perfectly, you can continue the attack chain infinitely, I think, and then you'll get these things you can assign to the 3 different buttons. So you can get something that pulls magic out, you can get something that pulls health out, you can set something that adds additional damage, and the more you chain these, the more you continue to go, and you can just act without getting interrupted, but you build your risk by doing that. And the more you build your risk, the more, like, it goes on and on. Eventually, you'll get to, you know, 100% threat where you aren't hitting anything, and then you're getting walloped. Now, you also get this ability to defend yourself. So if you're getting an attack or a spell on you, you can hit the exclamation point and then have the damage, or you can absorb some of it. All these other things, you can stun the enemy, you can silence them. Like, it's all very cool, but it's one person. You control one guy. And that was a shock to me. I didn't expect that. I was expecting a traditional turn-based RPG. It's more of a third-person exploration game. The visuals can get, the camera's a little wonky sometimes. The visuals are a little dark. I don't know if that's just how I was playing it. Maybe if I was playing on CRT, it wouldn't be so bad. But I sound like I'm down on this game when I'm really not. This game was incredible because it was so different. Now, there is a lot to uncover on this. You know, I'm a guy who doesn't like tons of systems, tons of options, and this game is just littered with them, but you can also circumvent them at times. You can kind of just force your way through it because there's 3 different types of weapons. You have edge types, piercing types, and blunt types. And then you also have 6 different types of magical affinities: light, dark, earth, wind, fire, and water. And then you have 6 different types of enemy types. You have human, beast, dark, got dragon, and something else, demon or something like. There's 6 of those, so there's so many of them. So you have to factor in all these with all the weapons you're using. And the weapons you have, you can actually combine together and then add gems to supplement your abilities. You can only do this in workshops. You can find armor and then combine the armor, although this is a crapshoot as well. I kind of just tried to get the best armor for the thing, and it's really complicated. I'm sure you can get super invested in it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like when I get into a fight, okay, this guy looks like a water enemy, let's weaken his water defense, okay, I can attack him. Like, that's really it, is you have the ability to weaken enemies, and then you have the ability to strengthen yourself with your magic, and they last a temporary amount of time. And when you go to attack, time freezes, and you get this little grid around you. So that's where it's kind of like Transistor, where you go into the planning phase, or I would imagine Parasite Eve with its kind of location-based gameplay, which is another one I gotta play. I'll probably get to that too soon. And it's just, at the early offset of the game, I was just doing single attacks. I didn't realize the exclamation points allowed you to chain or anything, so I was just, as soon as I would finish a button, alright, hit X, okay, get into it. And sometimes that's the best strategy for the game, is just do a single attack, because the more you build up your risk, you eventually have to start using this reagent to cut your risk, or you have to essentially get out of combat stance and then run around the map while the enemies chase you, because that will slowly decrease your risk as well. And then finally, there's the ability to use sword techs or skill techniques, and these allow you to use things that are not reliant on your risk as far as building it, but they take your health away. So once you get to a certain point in the game, if you have 300 health or so, I found it really effective to use the highest level risk, the skill technique, which hit me for 40 damage, but it guaranteed did 300 damage on the enemy. And especially in this game, sometimes you'll only be doing 1 or 2 damage, or you'll have a 0% hit chance or 10%. It's all over the damn place, but it's funny. It's so thrilling, for me at least, to be playing something that is unlike anything I've done, because I say it all the time, how many first-person shooters can you go through? How many third-person action-adventure with light RPG elements and roguelike everything is so samey. This game is not. This feels like the evolution of, say, the Secret of Mana ring menu system, with something that I can see them pulling from current games of the time, like the Parasite Eve combat, and then having the whole Final Fantasy Tactics aesthetic with the darkness and the moodiness, and just it was such a fun experience, such a good time to just live in this world, especially for a game that I went into it not knowing. I was probably thinking this was going to be more like Grandia or something like that. I don't know. I'd never read about it, and that's one of the fun things, is discovering these gems. It was such a good experience. And just going through, there's a Lost Woods section. The game has a map system where you can kind of figure out where you're going. Every once in a while, you'll get a random challenge where it's like, oh, get to the end of the room in 10 seconds. And then it'll give you a title. It's like, oh, you're a game developer. If you take it, if you take 5 minutes, it probably says you're a game reviewer, right? And it's just fun like that. There's not much in the ways of platforming other than a little bit of light puzzling where you have to move boxes around to get to different areas. The enemies respawn when you get a couple of rooms away, and for the most part, you can get away with just doing the decreasing their stats and attacking them, or silencing them, or poisoning them. But it is one of those things where, until you get enough know-how behind it, it is going to feel like a slog. Like, there are some fights where I'd be fighting for 5 minutes, killing this one dude, and then later in the game, once I know what I'm doing, you can knock him out in 2 or 3 hits. So you get that real sense of progression that is so nice, even though you really haven't changed much. And I was hooked. I loved every minute of it. I was so enthralled in this world, in this moodiness. Even the guy's annoying hair follicle things, I came to like. And the story is, out of this world as it is pretty intriguing. It's got some very Violent stuff for the time too. Also some risque things. Like there's definitely some douchebags beating up on women and whatnot. It's like, oh god, they went all out on this. This is not something that you would have seen all that much back in 2000. So highly recommend it. I really enjoyed my time playing it. I didn't get super involved in the minutia of it, which if you min-max this game, I'm sure it encourages you to go through it. And it is a little bit slow at times. The saving takes a while. You have to, in order to put stuff in the chest, it takes a while. You slowly find spells and things that increase your stats. When you defeat bosses, it kind of gives you an end of chapter thing where it randomly assigns an upgrade to you. And I can see how you can run out of healing items, and then you'll have to start farming things. There's no shops or anything to buy stuff, and it is very confusing as far as what's the good armor, what's the good this, how the hell does stuff, like the more you use items, they also almost break or get worn out, and you have to repair them at shops too. And there's so much I don't understand about this game, but I want to. And I really dig it. This would be a great thing to see something else in this style. I don't know if there's any other game like this. And the fact that you can target the different parts of the body never really seemed to factor in it much. I know if you hit the legs enough times, you can make them slow, but other than that, I never really found it all that useful. But you gotta be careful. You can get waylaid out of nowhere. Just get completely crushed. You gotta save often. There is a quick travel system that you find out later in the game, which is very useful. Although most of the time you have to wait. And it is nice that your magic recovers while you are out of combat. Your risk goes down, and even the health goes up a little bit. So really, it's a journey, but it's one well worth taking. If I had to give it a rating, I'd give this game a 9. It was very, very unique. Alright guys, that's what you get for this week. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.